With the Dawntrail expansion mostly done, a lot of Final Fantasy XIV fans are looking toward the future, wondering where the story possibly could be headed next. So today, we're going to be using the game's own lore to explain what locations could have the greatest amount of potential and why. But, by all means, if there's a location that I've not brought up by the time this video is over, be sure to write in the comments where you hope to travel next in the MSQ and why you think it would be very cool to explore. So, let's start off with our first contender. Number 1. Meracydia. I know it might seem cliche to some for me to put Meracydia as the number 1 spot, but honestly it made less and less sense for me not to bring it up first, the more I thought about it. And to understand why, we'll need to go over a bit of the location's history and importance within the overarching lore of this MMO. Meracydia is one of those locations that's been hinted at or referenced within the writing and lore of Final Fantasy XIV for the past decade. It's one of the world's 3 largest land masses. You've got the 3 great continents of Aldenard, Ilsabard, and Othard that are connected via land, but you've also got Tyrol to the west, which we've just recently explored in the current expansion of Dawntrail. Meracydia is the only landmass of significant size that we've not traveled to yet. But why is that? Well, there's actually a variety of reasons. Much like the sea separating Tyrol from Aldenard, the seas that reach all the way down to Meracydia are rumored to be the most treacherous in the entire world. It could simply be because of natural oceanic currents, sure, but the more likely culprit are the stories pointing toward an unstable climate. It's rumored that the natural ether making up Meracydia's landmass is unstable. This would mean that drastic natural phenomena are more likely to occur on a regular basis. Thunderstorms with lightning that comes down like rain, tornadoes forming as effortlessly as a summer breeze, and waves capable of swallowing entire ships with ease. Rumors are abound that Meracydia is not a welcoming place when it comes to traveling there. But whether these stories are true or not are entirely suspect. And the reason most sailors aren't trying to sail south to test these rumors themselves is because of the native Meracydians. The people living upon this continent have wanted nothing to do with the rest of the world ever since the Elegant invasion during the Third Astral Era. It's cited how hard the people and dragons of Meracydia fought to push back against Xande's invading forces. Bahamut, having been the first of Mingardzumer's 7 children to die, was not just a loss for the world, but a massive blow to morale for those living upon this continent. As stories would suggest that he and Tiamat had ruled over a piece of Meracydia with relatively great success, with invaders from the north having brought nothing but death, demons, and destruction with them. It's no wonder that the people of Meracydia would want nothing to do with the rest of the world, especially if they've been passing tales of heartache and woe to their children for thousands of years. But, who knows, the return of Tiamat to the lands of Meracydia may in fact be a driving force that eventually calls us south. Perhaps an expansion dedicated to aiding her in a time of need and lending our strength in a display to those people that may yet remain, proving that while the Third Era may have been a time of conquest, these new centuries could be the dawn of a new peace. Number 2. Ilsabard. Any of my longtime subscribers knew this was coming. And if you play Final Fantasy XIV and haven't subscribed, you should, because I've made dozens of videos for this game, and I would find it hard to believe that I've not covered something that you might find interest in. But this would not be a Synodic Scribe video if I didn't poke fun at the developers just a little bit for skipping over most of the land, history, and lore located within the continent of Ilsabard. While it's true that we did technically travel to Ilsabard during the events of Endwalker and a couple other times during separate quests, it is the only major continent of the 3 great that has yet to have an expansion dedicated solely to the variety of places, cultures, and landmarks there within. Because even though we've seen Garlemald, Bozia, and Rabanastre, we've not even seen half of everything this continent has to offer. And as you can see, it still has these bloody clouds covering them on the map. Not even Tudal has them anymore. Ilsabard is cited as being the largest of the 3 great continents. And yet, we've more or less been limited to Thavnair and Garlemald when it comes to overworld adventures. And even then, the Endwalker story was in such a hurry to give Garlemald some kind of redemption arc that it completely glossed over the geopolitical nightmare that these people haven't even begun to face. We have to remember that Garlemald is said to have conquered a dozen or so neighboring cultures during its conquest of this continent alone. While it's true that Garlemald is turning over a new leaf, no amount of inspiring speeches from Alphinaud is going to erase decades of bad blood overnight. It's important to remember that the relief team we see during Endwalker was stated to have been a fraction of the amount of people that were actually asked to come and help. And if people living in nations far away from Garlemald wanted nothing to do with them, imagine how furious any surviving and neighboring nations within walking distance must be. Especially since they are technically within distance to start a new war, or invade Garlemald in its weakened state. And to anyone that thinks like, oh, well, the Eorzean Alliance would never allow people to invade Garlemald, the aid from Eorzea has been tenuous at best. And honestly, the best thing Garlemald has going for them right now is the trade deal with Thavnair. So the reason people wouldn't invade Garlemald isn't to not kill the remaining Garleans, it's to not piss off the most successful trade nation in the current era. This is the entire reason a Garlean restoration event like with Ishgard never would have made sense. Because from a lore perspective, why would people dedicate resources to helping Garlemald rebuild when neighboring nations like Bozia and Dalmasca have needed it more for a longer time? So, an expansion that not only focuses on the various nations and political climate of Ilsabard would not only be an easy write, but it would also help to address the many plot threads that were kind of skipped over by things like Endwalker's MSQ. That, and it would allow us to finally say with confidence that we've adventured across all 3 of the great continents to a larger degree. Number 3. Homelands, new and old. Throughout the course of every expansion, we've gotten to see a variety of different places that are said to have been the origin point of certain races and cultures. The Azim Steppe for the Al-Ra was one of the most involved experiences. The quests for Bozia helped to tell us more about the history of the Hrothgar. Even the Alo dungeon gave us a glimpse into the oldest known history and origins of most Lalafell. But there are some grounds that have yet to be touched upon or even addressed for years. For example, we're well aware that the Rogadin that we see within Limsa Lominsa aren't originally from here. They actually hail from an archipelago far in the northern seas beyond Old Sharlayan. We know that they fled these lands after a failed coup to try and overthrow a tyrant, but since then we've gained almost no new lore surrounding this place. What happened after the Rogadin fled? What made this supposed ruler so bad in the first place? What became of those who stayed behind? All these mysteries and more could easily be explained by a new expansion, while also giving us an excuse to travel toward new locations. A similar example would be the Viera and their forest home located between the continents of Ilsabard and Othard. While a more difficult sell due to their very isolationist culture, it's important to note how many groups of Viera actually left the safety of their woods to help rebel cells push against Garlean occupation. Stories that involve locations like these would certainly help to flesh out the history and traditions of player races. But it doesn't stop there. What's wrong with expanding upon familiar maps and territories? Notice the fact that while we've seen multiple types of Sun Miqo'te within the story and overworld of Final Fantasy XIV, we've yet to see a single true Keeper of the Moon tribe beyond a few scattered poachers within the Black Shroud. Not only that, but we're yet to get a complete explanation on the current state of places like Gelmora and Hingashi. To give you a better idea of places that are said to have existed in the lore but have never been touched upon or shown, would be that of the Warriors, a playable job within the game. It's stated that there's an entire culture and tribe of warriors living alongside Eorzea's northern coast and mountains, but we've never seen or heard from them beyond Curious Gorge and his brother. So perhaps what we really need isn't an expansion that's in a hurry to reveal a brand new place you've never seen before, but a story that helps to widen the scope and appreciation of places that we've already been, breathing new life into maps and locations that you've not had a reason to care about since passing level 50. Number 4. Reflections. Dawntrail's story briefly revealed the history of a new reflection, the 9th. But as of this video, we unfortunately didn't really learn its ultimate fate despite its importance within the story. The 9th did suffer a lightning-based catastrophe, that's true, but it wasn't rejoined with the source, and after thwarting Calyx, it would appear that any attempts to abuse the key have been ended, at least for now. So what became of the 9th reflection? Did anyone outside of Alexandria survive? If not, is the world suffering from a similar fate to the first, which is still recovering from the Flood of Light? There are plenty of mysteries surrounding not only the 9th reflection, but its history as well. So an expansion or story about not only its struggle, but the fate of other reflections is always possible. With the final days ended but a handful of Ascians still kicking around, it's entirely likely we're not done learning about the remaining reflections, as the Ascians' talent for teleporting between each reflection and the source is already well documented. So, if the idea of more reflection-based adventures appeals to you, then you'll be glad to know that there is potential there for certain. Who knows, maybe it's time that the source and its remaining reflections create their own cosmology in a weird sort of way, instead of being this very poorly defined split between planetary realities. Number 5. Space. With the arrival of Endwalker, Final Fantasy XIV hasn't been afraid to add more and more sci-fi and technological aspects to the story and world building. What began as a trip to the moon and a spaceship designed to carry us to the far end of the universe has now developed into hyper-advanced societies and technological wonders that the world likely hasn't seen since the Third Astral Era with the Helligan Empire. So with the greater focus on space, technology, and other departures from the more natural and high fantasy aspects of this setting, it's entirely possible that we may see a greater focus on space, alien civilizations, among other things. But what we have to remember is that while we may have survived the final days, we know that many worlds and people did not. The Endsinger did not discriminate as she sang ruin over billions of people across many different worlds. So if we do travel outward into space, what we see might not be pretty. We'd likely be greeted by the ruins of many different and now dead civilizations. And if any people have survived this cosmic event, they might come seeking revenge. Because Hermes didn't just condemn his own people to face the final days. His choice forced almost every civilization in the cosmos to answer his homicidal challenge. So any surviving aliens may be justifiably vengeful at the assumed attack on their world. That is, if any of them survived with enough power and technology to be vengeful. While we know that Meteion did arrive on worlds already in decline, we also know that she arrived on worlds that weren't in decline either. So, food for thought. But for those players hoping for more technology-based and sci-fi driven stories, you'll be happy to know that there is still plenty of potential for that. Ultimately, it's a question of how far the developer is willing to take it, and how many other civilizations survived the Endsinger's ruin. And that, my friends, are just 5 examples of directions and destinations that the story could potentially head in Final Fantasy XIV's future. But, by all means, let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below. Be sure to express where you'd prefer to adventure next, or bring up any locations not mentioned here as you think of what would be the perfect place for an expansion's story. I look forward to seeing your thoughts. But until next we discuss the future story of this MMO, stay safe, my friends. Thank you all for watching to the end. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to subscribe and share with your friends. But before I go, I'd like to acknowledge my biggest contributors. A grand thank you to Amina Voltaria, Naray, and Potato. Links to things like my channel Discord, social media, and connections to my channel artist Caddy can be found down in the description below. Thank you all once again for your viewership, and I hope you have a wonderful day.